While NATO itself nor international entities like the International Court have jurisdiction over Americans, there is no negating that the international influence can have power in actually cultivating pressure and urgency in the American government in acting. What does this mean? That while the international entities themselves have no authority, they have immense power in actually influencing our reality. Why? Because what's more important than American voices? The global economy. See, what Trump supporters are to understand is the fact that if we tariff Mexico, if we tariff Canada, if we tariff the UK, if we tariff all of these allies, if we tariff everyone, that has a direct impact on us. It trickles back to us. Why? Globalization. Globalization refers to the growing interconnection of nations' economies. It represents the flow of financial products, goods, technology, information, and jobs across national borders and cultures. In economic terms, it describes an interdependence of cultures around the globe fostered through free trade. In this reality, we increase tariffs on China. Now Americans have to pay more for those products. We increase tariffs on Mexico. Now Americans have to pay more for those products. While this does create a black market for those products at lower costs, I myself, if I have to go to Mexico for some products, I'm only gonna sell for cheap to actual Democrats, to actual supporters of progress, not to Trump voters, right? But beyond the world economy is also what? Power. Geopolitics. Geopolitics is the analysis of the geographic influence on power relationships and international relations. To better understand why is it that the United States, even a democratic, quote-unquote, liberal head of state, President Joe Biden, has such an immense foreign policy that is much more conservative in regards to neoliberalism and what? Imperialism, in unconditionally supporting Israel in its quest to steal territory from Palestinians that is already theirs. There is already a two-state with boundaries. However, there are illegal settlers from Israel who get paid by the government to go steal territory in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and now they want Gaza. Why would the United States allow for this? Because you know what? Look at this. This is eyes on the Middle East. Israel is eyes on the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is there. Iraq is there. Syria is there. Why give that up? Giving that up would result in dangers to the interests of American geopolitical advantage. Similarly, if Trump starts to attack our allies, including endangering NATO, endangering the stability of the European continent, it's a very easy domino effect for Russia to get into allied Europe. Not only affecting an individual country, but an entire economic coalition of the European Union. You ask yourself, why is it that the United States handed over Poland base to NATO? Because all Trump has to do is give Ukraine to Russia, and then what's next? Poland, Germany. It's all of these countries are vulnerable to Trump rhetoric. Trump did say he wanted to take Greenland. Greenland belongs to Denmark. Denmark is right next to Germany. So a Russian takeover of this territory can really create a reality where Trump can actually control Greenland. Or have they seen this before? You see, the reason why South Koreans went into the streets and forced its government to actually go against the president is only because South Korea actually knows in recent memory what it is to be under tyranny. Europe understands what it is to be taken over by an empire. This brings the seriousness of ensuring that there is a lawful dissolution to a belligerent head of state extremely serious, extremely urgent. And as such, what handing over the US base in Poland to NATO tells us is in fact that not only is NATO, but the European Union and other European countries are getting to understand that and actually depending on the United States military to defend them. And this reality means that they are vulnerable to a belligerent head of states and a conservative attack of their actual peace and security. Particularly, a compromised head of state with Russia, who is a further threat, given that already a country who is influencing that next administration has an eye on the Ukraine, which is the gateway into the rest of Europe. Now, it's hard for Americans to understand this. Why? We are rather comfortable when it comes to geography. I lived in England for around 3 years, and I lived there Syrian refugee crisis, throughout the EU debt crisis, throughout the Paris beamings, the boom booms. I saw the increase in nationalization that resulted in. And why? Because there is a sense of danger and urgency when you are within these borders because they are so much closer together. We don't understand that. We don't understand what a tyranny is. We think that the Constitution is guaranteed, that it cannot dissolve because it's so powerful. No, it can dissolve because the Constitution is theory. Once that is subverted, we don't have it anymore. But as well, remember, the Constitution is the law of the land. That is our bulletproof vest in international justice. This means that in putting a man who is belligerent as the head of state, as the commander-in-chief, what does this mean? This means basically equivalent of putting the nuclear codes in the hands of a mean guy, of a villain. Because the United States is a beast on its own. It's a powerhouse. And if you have someone who is inheriting a reality to where American law can be above international law, that can be used for some really bad stuff. And Europe is waking up to this. And I think this is why we see a lot of diplomacy between them, like seeing NATO here, seeing NATO there. It's not necessarily because they themselves are going to do something, unless, in fact, there is a change in tradition and the United States government does give that authority, which is questionable, but it's not impossible. However, I think it's more about sharing intelligence, about sharing things in order to ensure that there is evidence that can make sure that this threat, not only to American constitutionalism, but to global peace and security, does not come to fruition. Because why? Because Europe already knows what occurs when such a head of state is put into the presidency and to the chancellorship and to whatever it is. They know, and they are using whatever cards they have lawfully in order to influence that. And I believe that that will be the most critical part of pressuring the government. I was there as the United Kingdom was feeling the economic shocks of the Brexit discussions, and as an American who had to exchange American money and that reality to where American money was less valuable than UK pounds in regards to the exchange rate, I started to get much more money for my buck, which I loved, but at the cost of what? Of British people. That's going to be the reality in which the American dollar, in which our economy tanks. It's going to benefit everyone else except for us. And in reality, when it comes to trade and globalization, it's also going to harm them, right? But it's going to mostly harm our pockets. And in that reality, not only is our economy as Americans at stake, it's in danger, but the global economy. And that is what's at stake if we allow for an illegitimate victor to go into the presidency. This is why I believe that there will be an immense pressure to actually maximize the rule of law and supreme law in order to lawfully dissolve it. However, the only way that this will not be dissolved is if Democrats choose decorum and a peaceful transfer of power. However, no provision allows for the peaceful transfer of power to be above constitutional supremacy and constitutional legitimacy, because what's the point of having a peaceful transfer of power when you sacrifice the social contract?